question. So what's your response to the Supreme Court judgment?
The Supreme Court judgment, by definition, is the law of the land. The Supreme Court is the highest judicial authority in the country, so there's no gainsaying that. The question for me, and I think for a lot of people, is how that is now translated into practice. Can that be done in a way that, of course, protects women, but also allows trans people to live their lives with dignity and in a safe and accepted way? I think that remains to be seen. I think some of the early indications would raise concerns in my mind that we are at risk of making the lives of trans people almost unlivable, and I don't think the majority of people in the country would want to see that. It certainly doesn't make a single woman any safer to do that, because the threat to women, as I think we all know, comes from predatory and abusive men. So that's my view, and I think you know my wider views on the matter.
Do you think that there should perhaps now be the UK government looking at making some sort of changes in the law?
I think the question is, nobody can gainsay the Supreme Court, so what it says is a statement of the law as it stands. It's not a moral judgment, it's not a statement of what the law should be. That's not the role of any court, that's the role of politicians and governments. So I think the question, I've always come at this from, I've spent my life campaigning for the protection and the enhancement of women's rights, and I bow to nobody on that. But I also think it's really important that the tiny, tiny number of people who are trans in this country get to live with dignity and in a way that they feel safe and accepted in society for who they are. I don't believe, I've never believed, and I never will believe that those two things are inevitably in tension. So the question now is, how does the Supreme Court judgment, which is an interpretation of the meaning of one particular Act of Parliament, the 2010 Equality Act, how does that translate into practice? Can that be done in a way that allows trans people to live their lives? Having read the Supreme Court judgment, and it strikes me a lot of the most vocal commentators on this haven't read the judgment, having read it, I don't think it's inevitable that that judgment makes the lives of trans people impossibly difficult. But I think there is a danger that the interpretations that some are putting on that will lead to that. And if that is the case, then yes, it would be my view that the law as it stands needs to be looked at.
4 women in Scotland, Joanna, Cherry, feel that their views were ignored during the passage of the GRR bill and say that you owe them an apology following the Supreme Court ruling, and I just wondered what your response would be to that.
On both of those, I fundamentally disagree. Fundamentally and respectfully disagree.
Can I ask why?
Because the views of all opinions were taken account of in the run-up to Parliament, not the SNP, but Parliament as a whole, with support from, I think, across all parties for that legislation. The time taken to get to the point of decision on that was probably longer than for any other bill, and different people had their say, and then Parliament decided. I recognise the different views on this. I've always actually recognised the different views on this, but I think it's important that respect runs in both directions. For every woman that I know or who contacts me, and I appreciate that that is not every woman in the country, for every one that contacts me or who I know personally with concerns about this, there are probably another 2 who have a different view. So for any group or any individual, me included, to say that their view is the only view that carries weight or the only view that has support, I just think is fundamentally wrong.
Nicola, are you disappointed that the misogyny bill has been dropped and the conversion therapy bill has been shelved until after the election?
Look, the government's taking the decisions on these, and I respect that. I know how difficult government is, and I'm not about to start giving a running commentary on the decisions that the current government make. I know that the government is committed to action against misogyny. I do think there would be an irony, and I don't expect this to happen because I expect the government to take this forward, and if the current government is re-elected, to take it forward in the next Parliament. But there would be an irony if a court action that was purportedly, and I use that word deliberately, purportedly about protecting women, ends up seeing a halt to a misogyny bill that is actually about protecting women, and I don't believe that's what the current government wants to see.
Just to go back to what you said about implementation of the judgment, which you're saying you had looked at, and it's now a question about how that is implemented. What have you made of what we've been hearing from the Equalities Commission so far? And you're concerned by what we've seen in the interim guidance that they have published so far?
I would be very concerned with that interim guidance if that became the final guidance, and I hope that's not the case, because I think that potentially makes the lives of trans people almost unlivable.
Do you think they're overreaching in their
Look,
interpretation
the
of the
EHRC
judgment?
is a statutory body, and I respect the role they've got. I'm not going to comment at this stage on where they might go. I'm making a general comment about I don't think it's inevitable that we go from the Supreme Court judgment to a situation where trans lives become impossibly difficult. Nor do I believe that's what a majority of people want the situation to be. So this is now, and there's a responsibility on governments and on public bodies across the country to, of course, consider what the implications of that judgment are, and that's a process that is underway, and I think we all need to wait and see where that takes us.
Says that the public sector and everybody needs to abide by the law. The
Well,
Supreme Court says this is the law and always has been. So isn't it the case that your government was working in an unlawful manner?
No, I don't accept that. I absolutely accept the Supreme Court is the highest judicial authority, but I don't think it is just as simple as taking a judgment about the interpretation of one piece of legislation and reaching that conclusion. Other people, of course, can speak for themselves. Right, I know that we have established you guys don't have other things to do today, but I do, so thank you all.
Thank you.